So I started some shit. Here's the post. Is it a little mean? Sure. Hilarious? Absolutely. And this started the sewing circle of Christians telling me that's not very Christ like. The unfortunate thing here is that this is honest. And we need to get away from this idea that Christ was just this hippie Jesus nice guy all the time. And so today I thought it would be fun to show you some of the shit I'm getting over a meme. So here's the post. I'm not gonna read the whole thing or dox this person. Um, but they're a director and they thought they've experienced deep hurt and abuse. They're very traumatized. Okay, fair enough. Um, why would telling them the truth hurt them further? Like, hey, you're not a woman. You don't look like a woman. You don't act like a woman. And spilling the beans just helps you get to the truth. Do I think people are going to shy away from Christians like us that want to be honest with them? Sure. But I'm not sure how effective kissing their ass is either. And saying, well, you know, God still loves you. I'm under the impression that we're all imperfect people. And therefore, um, mockery is just something that happens in between human lives. And interestingly enough, they took shots at us. Now I know that's a whataboutism, so I really can't make it for a good argument. But I don't think these people actually argue in good faith when they say that you're not acting like Jesus, when they have absolutely no idea how Jesus would act. None of us actually know the mind of God. That's heresy. We tried to become more like God. But to be so arrogant as to think that people can actually be their own popes and things like this is why Protestantism is not effective. It's because you can interpret the Bible however you want it to mean and say whatever the hell you want it to say. And this is how we end up with churches with pride flags and things like this because, well, we what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? And I don't know, maybe it's me. I grew up in the hardcore uh, turn or burn churches. And they used to say that's not very effective because it's not very nice. But interestingly enough, that put the fear of God in you. And the benefit of this was you ain't going to mess up because you know that God is bigger, stronger, and more equipped to deal with your stupid ass than pretty much anybody else on planet Earth. And this is why we're very reverent of God and we try to be as obedient as possible to his word because he could just take us out. And so the sewing circle got upset with me, guys. I wasn't very nice. Of course, in my typical red pill ways, I suppose you could say, I said, who gives a shit? Why am I concerned? Why am I concerned? We believe in a magical sky fairy daddy, according to them. They thought it was okay to mock our God in front of billions of people. And frankly, anything I post that, aggravates them, they just can't help themselves. Just have to say something about how awful I am. And it's funny. It's funny to me because I don't care. I've been called all kinds of bad shit. And here's the thing about going into the content creating scene, that I'll just spread this word of wisdom to anybody else that's interested in doing it. If you don't develop thick skin and cease to care what people think of you, and that they have to know your entire business and all this, just don't get into it. Otherwise, you're going to get eaten alive because uh, it's a dog world out there, folks. And you got to have some thick skin. Life's hard. Wear a helmet. And so, no, I'm not concerned if people turn away from the church, because we're basically just saying something that's truthful, right? We're saying, hey, look, like, you think you look pretty, but you don't. And it's so funny. I was having this conversation with a gal pal, you could say. And I was like, this is like what happens if you call an ugly girl ugly. She's like, you can't say that. I'm like, oh, I know, I just did. Now what? Like, are the joke police just gonna come and get me every single time they don't like a joke? Are the tone police just gonna keep correcting my tone because the Holy Spirit told them to do so? It's insane. And no one can operate off of this level of pious purity that we try to sell as Protestants. None of us can. We've all done stupid shit. We've all made mistakes in our past. We've all done things we regret. Why can't we have a God that's bigger than all of that? And why do we hold ourselves to, oh, well, it's this one little thing and God's just never going to look over it? Meanwhile, in the Bible, it says that the only thing would be to blaspheme the Holy Spirit. That's the unforgivable sin. And what this boils down to is unbelief or bearing a false witness. Because you could say, well, the Holy Spirit told me XYZ thing. And it could just be your subjective preferences telling you, oh, I don't like this, therefore. And this is where it gets kind of messy for the Protestants and why I had to get away from it. It's all about vibes. It's all about making Jesus marketable. And I don't see that in the biblical scriptures, ladies and gentlemen. I see that he was mocked. I see that he was hated. I see that even the people that followed and believed in him, were persecuted. And are we so are we just so arrogant that we don't think it can't happen to us as well? That we can't be judged, that we can't be mocked, that we can't be made fools of on occasion? It's going to happen. And I think you fight fire with fire. And you say, okay, fair enough. And you shoot back. And you don't give a shit. And that's what leads me to my new favorite meme that I just found. After a bunch of bunch of the sewing circle came after me and said, "Oh well, Jeff, that's not very nice. You have to keep in consideration that these people were traumatized and they were abused and they've been oppressed by the patriarchy." And it's like, this sounds like feminism bullshit. You want to get them out of their insane lunacy? Be like, yo, this is medically fucked up for you to think. Now, am I a doctor? No. Can I make that diagnosis? No. Do I think a doctor would be better at handling that than me? Yes. But let's just call it for what it is. It's a mental illness. And when you have a mental illness, you don't lie just to spare someone's feelings. We don't do this in schizophrenia. When the guy says, "Hey, the radio's talking to me," we go, "Yeah, sure, man. Let's validate that, man, because cool." We don't do that. We medicate. And so, I hope everyone enjoys this one. This is my new banner, ladies and gentlemen. White, straight, conservative Christian. How else may I offend you? Because I'm telling these people, look, is there anything else I can do for you? How else can we help you this fine evening? Perhaps we could read you scripture and tuck you into a Betty Bye and sing you a little bunny song, and let's play kindergarten with Jesus the rest of our lives. Have to put the gloves on for everyone because they're special, right? But we wouldn't even have these talking points if it wasn't for feminism. Because it's the same shit you hear when you upset a woman. Oh, you're being toxic. Oh, but they've been oppressed. Oh, but they've been abused. I don't doubt this, by the way, because I talk to people who transitioned or have detransitioned all the time. And a lot of them do have this dark, sinister past about them where Uncle Chuck wasn't wasn't very clever about how he went around his nieces and nephews, if you catch my drift. Now, is that god awful? Yeah. And I can I can have a level of compassion for that. Do I think it's absolutely absurd to then think you can dress up and be whatever you want to be? Yes. Yes, I think it's absolutely absurd. And in a world where being normal is now the new controversial thing to be, so happy to be it. Because you don't have to pretend with people anymore. You could just be who you are. And that's part of leveling up, is to be authentic. If people don't like it, they can kiss your ass. What do I owe you? I owe you fucking nothing. The people that want to be my friend choose to be my friend, motherfuckers. And you know what? We tell each other to fuck off every now and then. That's the level of camaraderie that I've missed in the old days. Like growing up, tell each other we're the F slur or something like this. We used to joke about this stuff. Now you can't even say it online in fear of not being monetized or canceled. It's absolutely insane because it's hate speech. But here's the thing, is that they could label anything to be hate speech. And then it's just going to limit our vocabulary and the way that language works. And I don't think it's very smart, because my belief is that Jesus wants us to be honest with ourselves and with Him. And if this is who I truly am, why would I put a mask on and try to hide that from Him? Like, oh, I'm too I'm too awful for you, Lord. Like, who do you think you are that you think you're so beyond saving? No one is. And really, it's just a heart condition that if you changed your mind and your heart about it, you'd be okay. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about this for a little bit and say that the sewing circle's after me, boys. It's bugged. But I'm not surprised considering how much traction Andrew Wilson catches every fucking day from the same people. Oh, they didn't like he said XYZ thing. Not only this, but it is super arrogant to say that he's not a Christian. We're not allowed to make those sort of judgments. Now, granted, I suppose you could question somebody's authenticity in this if they weren't reading their Bible, going to church, praying every day. But to be able to justify that they are doing those things or not doing those things until they actually tell you that, I'm not sure. And what's even worse is that people do fall off the bandwagon for XYZ reason. We know that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, never changing, always consistent, right? And so if we're uh, trying to achieve some level of authenticity in Christ, that means He accepts us for all the good and the bad. Now, this is where we get this conflation idea of, well, then I can just be bad, right? And we need to define our terms of what is bad. And normatively, when you're asking other people, like, what is good and what is bad, they're going off of their preferences, their subjective ideals of what is good and what is bad. But to place an objective on that, we'd have to look into a moral statement. And so ultimately, when we're in comedy and things like this, and we're making jokes at other people's expenses, you'd have to tell me where that's immoral to do so. And I don't think it is. I don't think it's immoral to do so. And so this is kind of where I think the Protestants are going to find a hard time justifying this outside of saying, well, it just wasn't very nice. It just wasn't very nice. And you're going to hurt someone's feelings. What's ironic here, though, at least from my perspective, is that they are much more concerned with those people that they're protecting, their feelings, than ours. We have to lie to them. And that's a cardinal sin. We have to tell them that Jesus accepts their sin, which is again a lie. And then we're basically just selling this personal Jesus, this false idea of God in their mind that is just going to validate everything and accept every part of them. And I'm not sure that that's a God you want to follow. Because remember, there's sacrifice involved in Christianity. There has to be. It's a big part of the theology is sacrifice, where God sends down His Son and Jesus is sacrificed for our sin. That's like a major role that when it gets played back to us, it says, well, you have to pick up your cross. And we really have to start asking ourselves, what does that mean to pick up our cross? And from what I understand, we have passions and we have these things that we give priorities to. And some of them can lead us into what I would think maybe like a mortal sin would be, like the love of money. Um, People kill and steal and do all kinds of crazy shit for money. They lie, they manipulate. So obviously, the love of money can be the root of evil. But that doesn't mean that money itself is inherently evil. Isn't that interesting? And when you look at other things like that, like sex isn't inherently evil, but it absolutely could be manipulated, used, exploited, like our current society has with liberation. Now that there are no consequences, we pretty much don't care anymore because there's no consequences. And when we stop to care as much, that's when you have girls getting into like pornography really, really early. And we know that the outcomes for both sexes aren't great. Like, this isn't something people should be proud of in either side of the fence, because like I think we should be going after the guys that are, you know, partaking in it as well, and say, look, like, maybe you are lonely. Maybe you do need a female companion. I'm willing to grant all of that. But do you really think you're going to find a good Christian woman when you're looking at women in a prostitutional way? They're being prostituted. And if that's your mindset, then that's how you're going to treat women. And so if you find like a godly woman and you're supposed to lead her to Christ and you're the head, what kind of warped view are you going to have when sex is like your North Star and prostitution's okay? And you saw all of these things that you probably shouldn't have saw, and all these actions that um, can really warp your mind. And not only this, but it can really warp your soul as well. And so, to mitigate this, to make it you know very hard to find, very hard to get into, and ideally for it to just not exist anymore. And people would ask, well, what's the downside for women? Well, um, you could go with a pair bonding if they're having multiple partners in this industry. That's going to screw up that. Um, Not only this, but I think it just at some point they don't take into consideration sex being meaningful anymore, right? So it's no longer seen as like this act of love and part of the sacrament of marriage, but just rather this exchangeable thing. And this is where it gets kind of messy, because when you're asking these types of women that believe this, like, what are you bringing to the table? Well, they think it's their sex. But ironically, like, if you treat a woman like her sex is the only valuable thing, they'll tell you that's derogatory. So it's like a contradiction. Like, we don't want to be exploited. We don't want to be sexualized. Yet we're willing to go online and social media and exploit ourselves and sexualize ourselves. It's like, what? We need to look up the word uh, cognitive dissonance in that one because it makes no fucking sense. But when they think that's all they have to, that's the only thing that makes them valuable, then they just rack up more and more bodies as time goes on. And that's why you have these women that think they're tens and things like that, because they had like 300 bodies, 400 bodies. And it's just the most bizarre thing because it's like, well, what if we told you that's not necessarily your superpower? Like, yeah, having the gate, being the gatekeeper to sex is definitely a superpower for women, but to treat it like it's a commodity and that you can just trade it for willy nilly shit, I think that's like lowering your value, really. Because from the Christian purview, like at least we're looking at least that aspect of things, like for motherhood and reproductive reasoning, and to start a family and to have there be purpose rather than just kind of the act itself being the end all be all. Well, I got some, I did this thing, I did that thing. And it's just really bizarre because it's like on one side of their mouth, they're saying, well, we don't want this, but feminism has propagated it. And that this is now considered part of the Enlightenment principles is that you're encouraged to be scandalous as a woman. You're encouraged. Not only this, but if you want to be a traditional woman and you want to be a traditional mom, you're going to get scrutinized for it because how dare you? But I think the interesting reasoning behind this is because they understand to some degree that that girl's being a pick me. But this isn't like an attack. And I think more women need to understand this because if you're a pick me, that's a good thing. You want to be a pick me. You want to be a gal that guys find physically attractive and mentally stable. And so when he's like looking at your personality type and your chast and you're virtuous and you're pleasant to be around and you're calming and you're peaceful and you're not combative and argumentative, he already sees more value in you than the woman that's gonna be the willful spirit that gives him shit every time, that vexes him on every little thing. And there's not too many men saying this, but I'll be the first to step up and be like, yeah, like this just makes sense to me that I'd rather have someone be submissive, feminine, motherly, kind, empathetic, a little shy than the party girl that's just like, woo, gonna take my top off and, all this shit. It's like, I don't know what happened to our society that this, the girls gone wild type of gal, is now considered empowering when you're reducing yourself to just your sex and the sex that you provide, which was the very thing that you thought men were oppressing you for. Like, you see how stupid this gets? It's like, but wait. Oh, men were oppressing us with this. Let's just turn around and be sluts. Like, what? Uh, and so I say all this to say that I think if you're gonna get in content creating and You're gonna say some fucking left shit things that people don't like to hear. Uh, you can't worry about it because this is the same thing, right? This is going to be the same thing on its face across the board. Just like the 304 women that want to shame traditional women because they understand the traditional woman's actually more preferable. I think they also want to convince men to be the Coomer Gremlin so that you can't end up with a good woman either. You ultimately get bamboozled into dating someone that wouldn't be as interesting, um, intelligent. It just across the board better to deal with. And let this be a warning that if you're going to come out and do this shit, um, not everyone's going to like you. But I'm not sure everyone has to. You know, like, I don't know where we get this idea of everyone having to like us. Because they're not. I mean, if you're being real, you're going to have haters. It's only when you're being fake that you can start to make these like fake superficial friends because we fake it, you know, we're not real with them. We don't tell them our shit. It's the real people that we trust the most, that we're the most honest with, we're the most upfront with. The closest people we have in our lives, this is how we are with them. We respect one another. We don't stab each other in the back. We back each other up. And so I think in a world full of magical thinking where everyone is making social media about being this fake persona, where we all put on this mask and we pretend to be a certain way, that as soon as you take the mask off and you show your real true self, people are gonna fucking hate you because you're not playing by society's rules anymore and you're going against the grain. And that means that you're trouble. And that means that you're going to have a target on your back. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd much rather have it that way. I'd much rather have people that I know I can trust instead of fake people who you never really know until you find out. It's like fuck around, find out kind of shit where you're like, oh, I trusted that person and then they fucked me sideways with that information that I gave them, or you never know. And I think it's built over time as well, which is why, like, some of your best friends, you've hung out with them for extended periods of time and they got to know the real you. They got to meet the real person. And this is why I miss about meeting up organically anymore, and why I think it's good to be involved in your community. Because it's just so easy to LARP on social media. It's easy to say whatever the hell you want and pretend. And with AI getting better and better, it's just going to be easier and easier for these people to pretend. So I'm voting that we go against the grain. And I'm voting that we don't really care what the sewing circle has to say. Because they're going to have their concerns. They're going to have their holy concernments. But if you think Jesus was just nice, then I recommend you read your Bible again. It wasn't very nice with certain people, and really hated hypocrisy. Now, a lot of people think the more religious or Zionist, however you want to put it, you get, the more you're being like a Pharisee. I'm sure some people have heard this before. And so basically, what this is if you hold to any standard, you're forgetting about grace, man. We should just be graceful. But I'm willing to wager those same people who say this shit also make judgment calls, even though they say, thou shalt not judge. And one of the best ways to find out is to say, well, wait a second. Would you allow a serial killer in your car as a passenger? Probably not. Why? Well, you have this preconceived notion that they're going to kill you, right? So your fight or flight mode is going to kick in and tell you, wait a second, like this doesn't seem like such a great predicament to get myself into. Let's avoid it. And this just makes sense. But you're making a judgment call, even though you don't necessarily know if this person's going to do anything to you or not. You did the same thing with your kids. You wouldn't let your kids be around a 3 PDO, or at least I would hope not. And this just makes logical sense to most people. Like, yeah, wouldn't want that. Well, that's a judgment call. And so we do make judgment calls every stinking day of our lives. And to say that we don't is completely absurd. It's completely absurd. And so, like, this whole judge not unless you be judged, really, like, when you take it into that context, it makes no fucking sense. It's like, of course you make judgments. You probably made at least 5 to 10 judgments just today on what you're going to eat. That's a judgment call. It's like, where would you draw the line then? Where do you draw the line? And they won't even be able to, well, whatever doesn't sit right with me. But we have to be careful about that. Because even religious behaviors sometimes don't sit right with us. Even being more Christ-like sometimes doesn't sit well with us. Would those also be things that we should just avoid because we can't obtain them? Or should they be things we strive for and hold ourselves up to and have other people hold us to the same standard? But this whole idea of just being reverent, being Pharisee, like, no. Remember, their problem was a heart condition as well. Like, it was we think we're better than everyone else. And I know the type, the Bible bashing, pious Christian that goes around thinking they're better, holier than thou. I get that type. But we do have to call people out on their shit too. And so that's not saying I'm better than anybody else. I don't think I am. And I don't think the people that are calling people out on their shit are better than 90% of them, maybe. Don't think that. But what it is for a lot of us, we were doing those same things that we're telling you not to do, that God doesn't like, and went through a lot of shit we wish we didn't have to go through. And so we're trying to tell you to avoid the pitfalls in life because we went down those pitfalls and we had to dig ourselves out of them. So we're just trying to help you out of the fires that are being created. But you're being judgmental. Can't win. can't win with these people. And so I noticed that Andrew doesn't even try with a lot of them. Just, you know, once you drink the haterade, it's over. It doesn't matter. I could save 50 people tomorrow somehow, some way. I don't know how. Insert weird circumstances in which I do. And there's still going to be people that think I'm the worst person on planet Earth because I made some people upset. Get over yourself. Like, get over yourself. We need to get away from this self importance thing. That is like the narcissist, the nihilist position that's been crammed down our mind holes from left wing lunatics that think you can be your own God, even though that's completely false. And if you start to go down those rabbit holes, believe you me, you're going to find yourself in really bad predicaments. And so I'd rather be that judgmental asshole that tells you, hey, don't do that shit. Like, it's not going to go well for you and mean well by it, than being nice about it and, just not saying anything at all because, that's what Jesus would do. Meanwhile, we have scriptures where the apostles call people out on their shit all the time. Jesus calls people people out on their shit all the time. This is ridiculous. But it's funny because when you see it in real time, you're like, oh, well, clearly I was way in the wrong. I shouldn't have told that girl she was being a prostitute. Darn. Darn. There was one more thing I wanted to cover. And if anyone wants to jump on and say, hey, that's also all good and well. All right, hopefully you can see this okay. Feminism is now trying to infiltrate the church. This woman was just ordained as a pastor in some weird schismatic church. I know it's schismatic because no Orthodox would allow for this to happen. And this is just another way to let the women in and give them equal rights. And get away from the oppressive patriarchy. And I mean, it's got to be upsetting to some of the more traditional guys. Like, I just found orthodoxy. So for me, it's like, well, this just makes sense. Like, this is something they would do. They just can't help themselves, sort of thing. But for like the more traditional guys out there who have been doing this for years upon years, they just got to be looking at this and going, what are we doing? Why aren't we taking Paul's teachings into consideration here? And what are going to be the fruits of this? Realistically, considering that Eve was the first one to be deceived by the devil. This is why God wanted man to be in charge, by the way. Now, I know some people don't like that truth. Some people think it's misogyny. But if you think about it, if women are more prone to being deceived, why would we want them as leaders? Why wouldn't we want reasonable men who aren't so quick to being deceived? They're going to use their logical brains to reason away, does this make sense? Does this work? Does this compute? Does it all add up? And I think that's why a lot of people think masculinity is now toxic, because it requires you to think instead of feel. It requires stoicism, meaning that you're mastering your emotions. And we live in a world that celebrates them. And we celebrate the I feels. And this gets really dangerous in Christianity, because we look at places in the Bible where it might not feel so great to be a Christian. And the question becomes, are we still willing to follow Jesus even if it is uncomfortable? Are we still willing to follow Jesus even if it does mean prosecution? How loyal are we? How submitted are we that we can trust the Lord in anything He wants to put us in? And it's actually a really good question, because for a lot of people, I think we get complacent. You know, well, I went to church and I read my Bible today and I prayed and I did XYZ thing. And now I'm good for a week. And I don't talk to God the rest of the week. I don't consult my scripture the rest of the week. And we wonder why we're drained by the time we get to church. Just completely spiritually, emotionally drained. Well, because it was never meant to be this way. You can absolutely pray every single day. You can absolutely consult your Bible every single day. And you should definitely have a communion with God. And the people that I know that do this have found an inner peace that is just unexplainable. And that's what the Bible says, right? It's peace beyond understanding. Or you could see a guy get his fucking car stolen and he's like, oh, well, guess that was God's will. Meanwhile, you're sitting there with your mouth wide open, like, are you okay right now? Well, you see, everything on this earth is temporary. I don't get to take that with me to heaven, now do I? But I get told that my reward in heaven will be great if I'm not focused on the details. And that's where a lot of our concerns lie, which is why there's so many passages about not worrying about tomorrow, not worrying about what you're going to wear. You know, it's not promised. Nothing is. And to take every thought captive, and then to think of the things heavenly. Just those three alone. It seems like we had a sort of continuation of a certain belief system of, oh, even if shit's gonna hit the fan, I still got God, and He ain't going nowhere as long as I am in communion with Him. I'm just like, all right, well, this happened. Now what? What's our next plan? Big guy? And so the question becomes, what are we doing to handle the places that are allowing this infiltration in? Like, are we just going to excommunicate them from the official church? I know during the Great Schism, at least with Protestants, this did somewhat happen where the Orthodox were just like, you know, they've gone so far from the faith, we don't even know if we can reconcile it anymore. I mean, once you tell people that they're basically their own pope and they can interpret their Bible to mean whatever the hell they want and have a personal Jesus, good luck. You basically found an atheist who now justifies his atheism with a false Jesus, which could be even worse, really, um, because it's just going to affirm everything and there's no denial. And so you could say, well, God's okay with my sins because He forgave me. But theosis is becoming more like God, and God was without sin. So I'm not sure we should just rest on that hill of, well, I'm forgiven and therefore I can do what I want now. Kind of a cheap way to throw away a good gift from God. It gives us salvation and we just throw it away really willy-nilly, like, oh, well, I was given grace. It means I can do whatever the hell I want with it. I think that's dangerous. And just by me thinking it's dangerous gets these types of people who mean well, I'm sure. Like, oh, but God wouldn't act that way because I wouldn't act that way. And so because I self-interpret Jesus to be equivalent to me and my preferences, the Holy Spirit told me to be concerned. But I think that can get into some really bad theology really quick. And it's why we as Orthodox reject all of that. Like, nah. Like, nah. We're going to stick to the traditions and church teachings that we had, that the apostles had. We're going to treat church prayer and our Christian lifestyle the same way they did. I think this is just a better approach because now we can't self-interpret the Bible. We have what every passage is referencing. And by the way, this does a whole lot better, especially if you're going to debate people who just blatantly, no matter what you tell them, want to refuse anything you give them, even though the transcendental argument, as far as I know, it's one of the best presupological arguments for why we have a God and demonstrates how. They'll just still say, nah, because it needs to be demonstrated to me. And it's interesting because I got in a debate with a guy the other day, and I wasn't even planning it. I was actually debating an atheist, and and he piped up all of a sudden because I had an interesting question, because I knew they had to be politically correct. They were mocking Christianity, and I knew they had to be politically correct. So I asked about other religions, and so this Christian comes in, and he's like, "Well, all the other Christians are the devil." Like, okay, can you demonstrate the devil though? Like, where are you getting this idea of devil? He's like, well, if you ask, it will be shown to you. Like, okay, now I have to think like an atheist again for a minute, because I already see this to be problematic from the guy who's skeptical, right? He doesn't believe this shit. It's like, but if I don't believe it, how is it going to be demonstrated to me? Well, if you really want it, you gotta really believe in it. Like, yeah, it's great. I reject your premise. I don't believe it. Now what? Now we're at square one again. He hasn't gotten back to me since. Because I'm just like, yeah. Here's the thing, man. I know some guys who are so staunch about it that even if I feel like it's like doubting Thomas level of doubt, where Jesus is going to have to come back, show where the holes were in his hands. And I still know some people who'd be like, source, where's the source? I reject this. So that was an interesting debate that I didn't get ready for, but like, well, yeah, I'm not sure you can demonstrate there being demons, bro. I'm not sure you can. Not to a person who's going to be completely. I'm granting the absolute skeptic, meaning he doesn't believe in God, but he doesn't believe in like Satan or hell or demons or anything like that either. He rejects both premises of Christianity. That's why he's like more like, I don't know what, I guess that's more agnostic, atheist, whatever. I don't know what sect you'd fall into, but I know there's people that reject both. They reject both things. And so he's going to be like, well, wait a second here. I don't believe in this demon shit you're talking about. Can you prove, can you justify it? I'm still waiting to hear an answer. Because I'm not sure you can. Not sure. Because I think we assign I think we assign that just to negative things happening on our day-to-day life. Maybe your car broke down. It was the demons. Or you think like a house is possessed. It's possessed by spirits. There's always this like mystical, magical, uh, spiritual thing with like new age believers, that they really like the more fantasy land idea of Christianity, the more magical side of Christianity. Um, but this gets problematic because I'm not sure that's what the miracles were there to do. I don't think they were there for us to be like psychics or things like this. And when we look at like biblical text on doing magic or sorcery or witchcraft, it's all considered evil and sinister, and I can kind of understand why, because it's like you're trying to some of it from it. You are doing the act. You are trying to make the ritual. You are summoning, and I think that's where it gets problematic. But I'd have to look into it more to give you a more in-depth answer there. But I think that's going to be the starting point. There is just that you're acting in your own flesh to get a thing to be done for you, and you're acting in a way that you think that the universe is going to provide it for you. But we had a we had a convo with a witch not too long ago, and after she performed her spell, she had anecdotal reasoning why the spell worked. Well, X thing happened, and therefore Y thing happened, kind of deal. And so the pushback here is like, well, how much of it do you believe was this spell? When you say, well, here's some other like just explanation, like all the other things that you listed here that happened kind of show like it might have been more so that these certain things happened and that's how you got it. Well, no, they wouldn't have happened if I didn't um conjure the spell or whatever. Like I wouldn't have open to the possibility of it or something like that. But ultimately, I think it's trying to put your will into other people. Even if you're trying to do it for a good thing, like maybe you're just trying to open up a shop or something like that, and you're performing a spell to become successful. And so, like, well, your spell is going to encourage people to walk in the store or anything. It's like, yeah, isn't that still on some base level like controlling their will? And well, no, they have to be open to it. It's like, well, what does that even mean, though? How do you be open to something that you don't know is happening to you? You know, like, you know, how do I know if I'm open to it? Are you just saying that it would only work for other people that believe in spell magic and things like this? Like, they would be the only, because I would reject it on its face. So are you saying that I wouldn't be open to being manipulated by magic? I mean, good if that's the case. Could. But I don't know what that means to be open, especially when you don't know what your customers like. I guess you're just saying, oh, the people that are already going to be intrigued by my store, may they be intrigued by my store. Like, well, this is just going to be self-explanatory at that point, right? They were already interested in whatever you were selling. So I'm not sure how much of that was the spell itself and people just thinking you had a cool logo or a neat looking shop, or maybe you had Yelp reviews or something like this that that gave people a sense of good customer service. There's so many like other explanations that you could look into, and then the argument kind of crumbles. It's like, well, now really all you have left is, yeah, maybe you did this thing, but how can you demonstrate that that in itself was what then, it was like a domino effect. Well, it rippled out, like I put my penny in the well, and now
these other things happen, but who's to say that they wouldn't have happened anyway? And this is just where I get a little bit confuzzled with it, because I'm like, well, what if the spell doesn't work? Well, then the universe wasn't open to it. Okay, so this just sounds like prayer. Like, it sounds exactly like prayer, only you're not utilizing God, who absolutely can change anything at the flick of a wrist. And if it's not within his will, you don't get it. Like, it sounds like God. It sounds like you're talking about God. You're just uncomfortable with using that language, I guess. And that's the problem. It's very bizarre. I'm going to be joining Chill Stream here in just a short amount of time, but I'm thinking about doing this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where I talk about something. And today's main topic was to warn anybody that's going to go into content creating, especially if you're Christian, to watch out for the tone police, because they're out there. They really don't like your tone. And you do not have to give a shit. I'm here to tell you that. Don't have to give a shit. Because interestingly enough, the people that loathe me probably don't care about me either. And I think it's a good masculine trait to just not give a care about other people's opinions. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take them into consideration from time to time if it's a good opinion. But I think there's this drive, right? I think there's this masculine drive that we adhere to. Now, we're on a mission. We're here to do a thing and fuck anybody that gets in my way. And that's what makes us really competitive. And I think it's good to have that drive. And it's what builds comrades, because while, maybe I'm in competition with every other creator on planet Earth, and we might be talking smack to each other. I know the good ones, they do work with you. They build your brand. They get more people to like your shit. They get more people to listen to you. And here's the thing, at least with the good ones, is they don't want to slander you on purpose. Because typically what happens here is that people slander you to get your attention. They get your attention. They get a little video made about them. They get their 30 minutes of fame. And that's kind of the end of it. But what I noticed from the people who don't do that, they're reoccurring guests. Because they understand, oh, hey, rather than me just diss the platform because I don't like it, maybe I'll work with this guy and we can create good content together. And I wish more people understood that. It's like, yeah, if you reached out and were genuine, you probably could have worked hand in hand on several things. But because you wanted to decide to go online and be a keyboard warrior, you got 30 minutes of fame. Everyone laughed at your stupid ass as you spurged out and made an absolute fool of yourself. And now, as a creator myself, I look at people that act this way and I go, oh, well, gee,
Do I really want to create content with someone that's going to stab me in the back like that? Every 2 seconds they don't like something I say, they're going to go tell me to fuck off and how my channel sucks or whatever. It's like, do I really want to deal with that drama every day? And it's like, no, I'd rather deal with uh I rather deal with people who I can create good content with, and have good communication with. Like, it just, that makes sense. The ones that just want to blab off and create drama, that is like high school level bullshit. And it's gossip, by the way, which is not very biblical for me. Um, so like, it's just like, you just don't want to get yourself involved, you know, and it creates this distance, and just not a smart way to run your business. Just talking shit on everyone on the internet. It's like, I don't know. I think if you open yourself up to it, I mean, you're dishing it out, and you should be able to take it. So for these people that want to completely harass me every single fucking day, it's like, well, you're just giving me free content. Thank you. You're just giving me something to absolutely make fun of you for. But the ones that I've worked with thus far, they'll tell you to your face. They're not shy to say it to you, like, hey, and they pull you aside and they say something to you. Those are like your real friends. The fake ones are going to say shit behind your back when they know there's nothing you can do about it. And it's like I said before, once you start drinking the haterade, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You could try to be the best person on planet Earth, and they're still going to hate you. And so I think it's funny just to let them believe it. Just let them believe it, because there's no sense in convincing them otherwise. I think that's just a giant waste of time. Just a giant waste of your time trying to defend your honor and your reputation. It's just not worth it. Just address it really quick and be like, this is what's happening right now, and move it on, move it forward. Because I think the more popular you get, the more haters you eventually get too, because you're always going to get this small sect of people who didn't think you could amount to anything, and they're jealous. Well, it should have been me. This guy's an asshole. Why are people following him? What I tell people is like, look, if people follow me, maybe it's because I have something real to say, and maybe they like the way I say. I don't know. It's my privilege to have people follow me. It's not the other way around. So it's on them. And if they don't like it, they don't subscribe. That's it. Like, I don't know what to tell you there. Make interesting content, and you'll find people that want to follow you. Even Coomer Gremlin understands this and has followers because he's got tons of people that believe all the same talking points he spews out. Just starting out, I think you just gotta know your brand and fuck what the haters say. if I had time to deal with every single one, I wouldn't have time to create content or do other things in my life. It'd just be endless apologetics for me. And I'm just not interested. And so my advice to other people is just to, pick your battles. You don't have to fight every single one. Because a lot of these people just want blood for no fucking good reason. No fucking good reason whatsoever, other than they just didn't like what you had to say. And if that's the only thing they don't like you for, then Jesus. Like, all right. Well, like I said, I got another panel to be on. Thank you everyone for coming on. Don't be shy. Come join me in a panel sometime if you're following. I know I'm up and coming, but would love to have some people on the panel. Try to put the panel link in the comments for people to join. Like and subscribe. Like I said, I'm going to try to do this more often so I can actually maybe get people up here with me. So you don't have to listen to me bullshit the entire time. I am working some things in the future with other creators. No indefinite information on that yet, like what we're going to talk about or anything like this. I just set them up and then hash it out before the show. That way we know we're going to have a entertaining show. But I'm always down for like the bullshit streams too, like the chill streams where it's just like we're just really here to just vent or blow smoke or whatever it is. And I don't think every single show has to be high octane, high energy. I think if you have one or two bangers, you're doing enough to bring in a good amount of people. But from my experience, even like the best shows, they'll have an episode or two where it's like, could have went better. And that's the thing about entertainment is, you're only as good as your last song. And that's something I learned from being a musician for a very long time. So you're only as good as your last podcast. So there's only room to go up. And hopefully a couple of contracts I signed are going to go through, and you don't just hear my voice anymore. There'll be other voices on here because it's part and partial why I want to do this. Like, I actually enjoy talking to people, and I think that this has become a really interesting way in doing so because now we're getting ideas from people we wouldn't normally interact with on a day-to-day basis. Like, my one friend who's a creator is on the other side of the world. And I think I'm going to try to talk him into a panel sooner than later, because once we get going, for any of the music nerds out there, hopefully a lot of you would subscribe to it. Like it'd be, we talk about producing and we talk about marketing and we talk about, like, if you're going to sign a contract, things to look out for, boundaries to set up right beforehand, all of that. Like, we get into all of it. And I think it's really good for anyone that's going to get into that kind of market to understand these things. Like, even if you're going to do a collaboration, to set up like just a basis of, well, who gets what, like, is it a 60-40 breakdown? Or are we splitting it 50-50? Like, it's always good to figure out, even before a dollar sign gets involved, to just kind of lay out the groundwork before you do any content with them, because um, there's always going to be that one person that fucks you over if you don't. They're just going to take advantage of the situation that you didn't set up these boundaries and these standards beforehand. And if you don't agree to anything, they could work halfway through your song or whatever it is, and then just take it. And there isn't really too much you can do about that, because you didn't, do your due diligence. And so to have him on and talk about this a little bit more would be great, because I mean, he really instilled that into me first, for me to be saying it myself. But we do have really good backs and forths about this. Whenever you have someone that wants to borrow your music or use your music, to be really careful in it, because if you don't have it copywritten, they can just take it and then they can monetize it off of them, and then there goes all your hard work. And your hard work and your time and your effort are valuable, and therefore you should treat them as they are. And without going too much further down that road, because I could be on here another 30 minutes talking just about that. Just to keep that in mind, even if you're getting reached out by like a label or something like that, to make it known, like for me, letting them know I'm not going to be told what I can and cannot create. I much rather work solo than to have some big corporation say, well, you have to take this down or that down because XYZ reasoning. Now, of course, you do have to placate to the platform. So, because we're on YouTube, you do have to be careful with, but I do understand why some people just prefer to work on their own and create their own team and make their own label and kind of do their own thing, because I've been in those situations where you don't get any artistic freedom, and you're basically told this is what you're going to create, and if you don't create it, then we're not going to work with you. And it's like, you can't really tell a creative not to be creative. It's against our nature. And all of us have, I don't know if all of us, but the ones I know, I'll put it that way, the creatives I know have the most stubborn, rebellious spirits in them, where if you tell us not to, we're going to do it twice just to spite you. Like, that's the type of people we are. Is, when you say, oh, you're not going to make it with the music, or it's like, you watch me, motherfucker, I'll do it twice. And you get to watch. And so it gets problematic if they want to start controlling what you're putting out, so to keep this in mind as well. And whenever I get a new contract, I kind of tell them, I'm like, I do Christian content, I do debates, I do all kinds of things, and I really don't want to get told no. So, like, if at any point any of that's like a no-go, don't work with me. Like, I prefer how I'm doing it now, and being on my own and developing a team over a span of however long it takes, than to, get into something where, yeah, maybe it's helping me out in one way or another. Maybe it's even propagating the channel. But if it's controlling your some of your freedoms in that. That's where I'd caution anybody, because we're all created to be creative, I believe, because we're created in the mind of a creator. So I think we can all be, now different people display this different ways. You got hobbies, DIY shit, um, storytelling. Every person's gonna have a different niche. Um, so my advice, I think it can just be translated across the board that way, because like you could be a novelist and writing a book, and then like um, you have some big publishing company that wants to publish you, but you have to redact chapter 2 and 3 because they didn't like it, or you have to
reword it or redo it or change the story because they didn't like the ending. It's like, no, like I wrote the story, it stays. And I'd rather be my own publisher if like I'm going to be told how to publish. Like, no, you publish the book, you propagate the audience of the book, but I write the story. So you don't, I'm not gonna let you in on that one. And see, I just utilized it for something other than music, but it's the same concept, right? Just something to keep in mind for all you creatives out there. To be careful who you deal with. That's number one. Be careful who you deal with. Don't make an ass out of yourself just to gain an audience. Be yourself. I think more people will appreciate the authenticity than they will like if I just started LARPing and was like, yeah, I'm a self-made millionaire and this is how you level up, man. It's like I'm just giving you what I know based off of my own experiences and from talking to other people. So and then 3 would be to stand firm and to not let people tell you what to do all the time. Now, granted, like if you get in a job or something like that, and there's obviously going to be outliers, but in general, like the principle of it is not to sell your soul just so people would accept you. I think that's absolutely stupid, and I don't think people respect you for it ultimately, because they understand you're just a fucking pushover and you got no backbone and you're just willing to suck whoever's dick or kiss who's ever ass just to get attention or just to get more audience. It's like, no. They can get fucked. I'm not here for the clout. If I get the clout, it's a blessing. I'm here for engaging with people and hoping that they want to engage back. That's it. Anything else is just a bonus. And I think having those modest terms of shit. It's a nice goal to shoot for 500K subscribers, but when 10% of them fucking hate your guts, it's like, well, shit happens, right? Anywho, thank you for listening to me ramble. Please like and subscribe, and for God's sake, someone join my panel sometime. I like having multiple minds. I'm gonna be, in another channel here in a couple minutes. I don't know what we're talking about yet. It's always a surprise to me. But you can catch me over there if you want to say hey. And I'll see you guys Monday.